So welcome back. Trish Triumpho Sullivan here, and we're going to be talking about our how to basically do some basic watercolor techniques. So this is ART6 painting, watercolors and oils. I want you to look at my paper that I stretched last lecture, or a couple lectures ago, and you can see that where it was all wrinkly before when it was wet, now that it's dry, it's nice and flat, and you can really see that it's flat here as I hold it up. I have a few tools with me here that you'll need to have ready. First of all, a jar of water. Make sure you have a cover for it so you can cover it, doesn't spill. A rag, some rubber cement, and a roll of painter's tape. So this is the kind you get at the hardware store or the paint shop. Then I also have my paint palette, my paint pat, or kit, and my two brushes. One round and one flat. You can see. So I'll be using both of these brushes and your paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this paper into some squares using the tape. And we'll start off, I'll go right down the center here. You know, don't worry about getting the tape perfectly straight. This is not the important thing with this. So you'll divide, you'll put, let's see, 3 pieces going vertically. Maybe a little bit too wide. And 2 pieces horizontally. So you're going to divide it one way into quarters and another way into thirds. I'm just trying to eyeball it. Don't worry if it's not exact. This is not something you guys have to measure and get it exactly perfect, okay? And I would take one more. I'm going to straighten this one out though, just to make everyone happy. And you might take one more and just put it along at the bottom here. And the reason is because we're going to be writing on it, on this white space. So we want to maybe leave that little bit of white space. So it's divided into 12 squares. Remember, this doesn't have to be perfect, so don't stress over if it's not perfect. The next thing you're going to do is hydrate some paint. Now, what hydrating means is you're going to get it wet. And I want you to watch what I'm doing here, because this is how you hydrate your paint. Get some water on your brush, right? It's called loading your brush. If you load your brush with some water. And then for these first couple squares, we're going to only use 3 colors. We're going to use yellow, orange, and red. Now, as you do this, you notice I'm just kind of going back and forth with the water on the paint, right? This hydrates it and gets me a little bit of yellow paint. Put a little bit more water on there. Now, the main thing is you need to make sure you rinse your brush in between your different colors. So what you don't want to do is contaminate your colors one with the other. You can see I'm making a little bit of a mess there. So normally you would get your paint wet and then you would lift it out by loading your brush with it and put it on a palette where you'll mix. Today we're not going to be doing mixing. We're just going to be doing some hydrating. Notice that I rinse my brush in between and wipe it carefully on my rag. All right, now I'm going to hydrate some orange. And you can see it just takes a couple minutes. You know, don't stress it. Doesn't happen in a second. It takes a little bit. You know, this is semi-moist watercolor paint, so it will hydrate, but it may not do it instantly. Okay. Looks like I got enough orange there. That hydrated up pretty quickly. I'll rinse my brush again. And get a little bit more water, and I'm going to hydrate some red. All right, so now I've got three hues in my palette, hydrated, by just going back and forth with the brush a little bit with some water on it. So now I've got some paint ready to go. Now for the first part of this assignment, we're going to paint basically some stripes. So we're going to have to paint them and let them dry. This is one of the things about painting, is you have to often let your layers dry, because we paint with layers, both in watercolors and oils. And in between layers, you've got to let them dry. Otherwise, you're going to have a muddy composition. So we'll start with, get my brush. So I'm going to load my brush with a pigment, right? With a hue, with a color here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a yellow stripe. Now see, you can see that there's some paint on my brush in it. If you have a good quality brush, it should hold a decent amount of paint, at least to do one swipe. So in the first square, I'm going to ask you to take your brush and holding it at kind of this type of an angle, you're just going to drag it across your paper like that. Don't worry if it's not complete coverage. Just drag it across and leave it. I'm going to let that dry. You're going to rinse your brush. Oh, actually, wait. We're going to do 2 yellow stripes. My apologies. So before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and do one more stripe on this side. Right. You can see it doesn't have complete coverage, but that's part of watercolor and the charm of watercolor. It doesn't have to be perfect, and in fact, perfect watercolors are pretty uninteresting. Okay. So the next, I'm going to take my orange. Remember, orange is a secondary color. It comes from mixing yellow and red together. In this palette, in this kit, or watercolor set, in my little pans here, I have some secondary colors as well as maybe even some tertiary colors. So then we're going to just drag an orange stripe across as well. Right? We'll load the brush a little bit more, and we'll do another drag right there. And see, you notice it doesn't have complete coverage, but don't worry about that. Right? And the final one that I'm going to do is red. And my dog is quiet. Hey, my dog is egging me on here to hurry up. So there's a red, and there's another red. And my dog's name is Pip. So just drag it across, and don't worry if it doesn't have complete coverage. Now we're going to have to leave those to dry. Okay. When you rinse your brush, always make sure you take it out of the water. Never, never leave your brush sitting in water. And this is a huge, big deal, because your brush, even though it is kind of crimped here on the ferrule part, the main way it's held in is glue. What happens if you soak some glue in water for a long time? Well, eventually it softens. The glue will soften, and your brush bristles will start popping out. Even the most expensive brushes are held together this way. So you never, never, never leave it sitting in water. Whenever you're in between, always take it out. I wipe it on my rag just to kind of dry it up so it's not getting my table wet, and set it down. You can also have another jar and have them sitting upright like this. I usually do have 2 jars, but in order to make it look a little clear here, I didn't want to put too much stuff out. Okay, so I've got my first 3 stripes on 2 of my squares. Now I'm going to also prepare, because I'm going to do some resist as well. I'm going to take a little bit of rubber cement, and I'm going to put some on one of my, there we go, on one of my squares here. And you'll see as we get going with this, we'll have to leave that to dry. So we'll go ahead and leave that to dry, and we'll move forward. We'll have to leave these to dry as well. In the meantime, I want to show you quickly how to do a wash. So this is a dry wash. Now, what a wash means is we're covering a complete square with a solid color. So in this case, I'm going to use blue. So I'm going to hydrate up some blue here. And you're going to need, or like, this isn't blue. Whoops, well, we're going to use that later anyway. My apologies, I got the wrong one. I started hydrating some violet instead of blue. So here we've got some blue, some dark blue. I'm going to hydrate this up. And I'm going to make a wash. Now you want to have enough hydrated paint to complete your wash. It's going to not work very well if you get halfway through the wash and you're not, you're out of paint and you've got to rehydrate some. So you want to kind of get enough, and get a little bit more water here. And see if I can get enough hydrated here. Okay, so a wash is what you use to cover a background